Originca umsi reaction. This is how Poland is preparing for war, but it's task and purpose. I mean, yeah, obviously, as soon as they heard there's a war on, like, yeah, that's it. We need to prepare. If history is anything to go by, we are completely screwed otherwise. So, I mean, it's when I saw the map, I realized like it's just in the place geographically located in a place. So, countries like Germany, Russia, I just like, get excited. Poland is the first one that gets screwed, right? Constantly get consumed. How many times now? Like 2, 3, 4 times? Who knows? Catherine the Great, right? Obviously, World War II. Every time Poland gets screwed. So yeah, if Putin's ambition, let's just say Russia's ambition becomes bigger and bigger, try to take over more and more country, yeah, Poland is at risk. So yeah, Poland this time is like, yeah, we're not doing the World War II version 2 this time. Yeah, we're preparing for it. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, this is from the channel Task and Purpose. He made multiple videos like like one after another. I'm guessing things are moving on that fast because his schedule is not. I mean, he uploads it like fairly regularly, but not this fast. So I'm guessing things are happening right now. That's why he's uploading this fast, I guess. So let's wait. Remember, if you like more external phone, subscribe. So that way I know which type of videos to react to more. I like this geopolitics type of way. It's like really informative, right? What happens in the world. Obviously the Iran thing that happened recently. I'm gonna guess videos like that he's gonna make next or something. Yeah, it's like everywhere something is happening, right? After like living decades where things kind of move but kind of doesn't move and slowly moves, we are finally in a time where it's just like things are moving really fast all around the world, right? Not in just one place but many places, which is fucked up because usually that's an indication of the tensions are rising, is escalating. Who knows? That's what.
Welcome back, Spare Parts Army. Poland is now preparing for war in the hopes of deterring it from ever happening in the first place.
Poland is sending more troops to its border with Belarus after claiming 2 Belarusian military helicopters violated its airspace.
Most importantly, I think that if Russia is stopped in Ukraine, it won't attack again.
They intend to double their land forces to a staggering 300,000 personnel over the next 5 years, seeking to stop people once and for all from claiming they accidentally invaded Poland. To put this into context, once it's completed, Poland's military will be larger than the French and German forces combined, which makes a lot of sense because a lot is at stake for them. Polish Prime Minister Tusk said, quote, "We are living in the most critical moment since the end of World War II. The next 2 years will decide everything." Poland aims to achieve this gigantic goal by raising their defense spending to 4% of GDP, or about $133 billion over the next 5 years. It's the highest percentage in the entire NATO alliance.
Whoa! NATO defense spending. Oh, I guess of the GDP. I'm like, how it's spending more than United States, but no, of the GDP. So yeah, in that way, it makes sense. But yeah, damn. Even by GDP, it's like insane compared to everyone else. It's like 4%.
It's like they're throwing out their old military and replacing it with a brand new one. But what challenges will Poland's defense modernization efforts face along the way? What type of unique weapon systems will they need to invest in? And which strategies will they deploy on the tactical level? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Hit the like and subscribe button and let's find out. Not my circus, not my monkeys. It's a popular Polish saying that means it's none of my business and I'm not responsible for this volatile situation. However, when your nation is located at the crossroads between Eastern and Western Europe, when it comes to geopolitics, Poland rarely has the luxury of it not being their monkeys. Today, Russian forces in Ukraine.
I mean, that kind of, if that's their policy, right? I guess it means that they're try to stay neutral, I'm guessing, throughout the years, and so obviously powers around it try to consume it. I kind of see that, but yeah, that's just fucked up. What if other people wants to make you their monkey, right? You have to like prepare for it.
Are battling.
It's just like Belarus, Ukraine. So if like Russia takes this, like this whole, it's literally at the border of Poland, right? If somehow Russia wins in Ukraine, yeah, the Belarus is already Russia, right? So it's literally at the border of Poland. Look at that. It's just like geographically located where, like, yeah, if you want to progress ahead, yeah, you need to go through Poland somehow. So yeah, obviously they'll learn the lesson for past multiple centuries. They're like, not this time.
on a front line that's only 800 kilometers away from Poland's border. You wouldn't even need to take turns driving there. It's like the same distance from New York City to North Carolina. But first, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, IMAX, and their new documentary, The Blue Angels, in theater this week only. And trust me when I tell you, you do not want to miss seeing this one in the full IMAX experience.
Yeah, well, go to original video page link and from there support this channel, I guess.
Or you just want to see a badass action movie that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Go check out The Blue Angels in IMAX theaters this week only. Poland is one of the countries most affected by this conflict because they've already taken in 1.3 million refugees from Ukraine. Poland's publicly stated justification for increasing defense spending can be found in their 2020 National Defense Strategy paper approved by their president. Quote, "The most serious threat is the neo-imperial policy of the authorities of the Russian Federation. The military aggression against Georgia, the illegal annexation of Crimea, and the activities in eastern Ukraine have violated the basic principles of international law and undermined the pillars of the European security system." If that statement by the Polish government sounds like a bunch of paranoid hogwash to you, like my therapist always says to me, then remember, Poland has the distinct honor of being one of the most invaded people throughout all of history. They've been invaded or fought battles.
Not just invaded, consumed, or like completely erased many times. That's the most fucked up. Like there are countries that get invaded. Poland gets invaded, just like it gets invaded by major powers, and not just one, multiple, right? Major powers get together and just like, how do we take Poland? Like, which piece of Poland should we take? That's the kind of conversation they have. That's insane. You know, the Catherine the Great and all that, doing that at Prussia and all that.
Hundreds of times on their own soil in the past 1,000 years. The Mongols, Teutonic Knights, Nazi Germany, the Ottoman Empire, and Russia are just a few of the usual suspects to invade. However, on the other hand, critics of Poland's national defense strategy like Robert Cholda state that he believes they could have trouble securing long-term financing for the project. He believes the large-scale orders are driven by political populism aimed at gaining popularity here and now instead of being a well-thought-out plan. Either way, so the potential economic advantages of their valuable geographic location has been offset by the fact that they have so few easily defensible natural land boundaries, rivers, and mountains to prevent foreign invasion. Imagine you just bought your dream home, but it's located in the middle of a shooting range. That's Poland. This is part of the reason why Poland lived under nearly half a century of Soviet communist rule, where their economy was tightly controlled. This meant their development was constrained by the higher priorities of the Eastern Bloc. That is, until they finally gained genuine independence in 1989. But Poland instantly faced a major problem. All of their bases and military infrastructure was created to facilitate advancing to the west while defending against an army trying to move to the east. According to a publication titled Poland's Threat Assessment, after 1991, Poland had to do a complete about-face and flip their bases locations to face a threat from the east. This was a lot harder than simply moving your no trespassing signs. This was done while simultaneously pulling off major civil reforms to transform from a centralized communist economy to a democratic free market one. As a result, Poland experienced an economic resurgence, but during periods of prolonged peace and prosperity, it's easy to let down your hair and lower your guard a little. From 1995 to 2009, the Polish military size was reduced from 300,000 to a low of 121,000. Many units were disbanded, and training centers closed their doors. According to the research paper,
I mean, you can see that though, right? About fall of Soviet Union, then like 2 decades of nothing happening. Just like, yeah, probably we are in peacetime before like post 2010, like with Georgia and like Crimean and access, and that's when they start to sweat. Like, okay, maybe it's like coming back up again.
Titled Defense and Industrial Policy in Poland by Marcin Turkalowski. Even as Poland's economy grew, their defense manufacturing capabilities atrophied and received less funding. In 1999, Poland joined NATO and in 2004, the European Union, in an effort to solidify alliances and maintain that sovereignty. But this had the knock-on effect of purchasing tanks from foreign NATO allies, becoming dependent on them instead of their own industrial base. Poland's former Minister of Defense said, quote, "Until then, the threat from the east was underestimated. However, we soon realized that the policy of reducing the army was leading nowhere and was the wrong approach." Try as Poland might to stay out of the geopolitical circus, those monkeys kept dragging them back in. Because in 2014, the Russian invasion of Crimea seriously spooked Poland. They took two major steps in response. The first was transferring military technology from the United States and South Korea. The second was consolidating the defense industrial base from 50 separate Polish companies down to one single holding called the PGZ. Then, in 2022, Russian invasion of Ukraine saw Poland taking the step of kicking their effort to get rid of their old Soviet-era equipment into high gear. 260 tanks were gifted to Ukraine, which is almost all their Soviet-era T-series based tanks. It's like the old Polish saying goes, with the hag off the carriage, it's easier on the horses. That was considered politically correct in the 1800s, because now they could focus on replacing old.
Yeah, there you go. I forgot task and purpose do this, right? Like, slide in sayings from that country. There you go. I mean, yeah, kind of makes sense after realizing like what's happening in Ukraine, right? How talks of like giving them F-16, one like, okay, you can't just give them F-16 because they've been only trained with Soviet planes. It's not the same thing, right? It's not easier to just like jump to Western equipment. So the way they are doing this is like thinking advance after seeing what happened in Ukraine. So when the time does come, right, with the Western help, they can actually adapt because they're already using Western equipment.
Stockpiles with brand new arsenal. I think one word can sum up all of Poland's national procurement strategy since then: mass. It's the piece of the puzzle that Poland feels they can bring to the table: sheer manpower. This makes sense as their population is currently in the top 10 in Europe at an estimated 41 million people and a land mass of over 320,000 square kilometers. That's a lot of ground to cover down on and protect, because the linchpin of Poland's whole defense strategy revolves around acquiring 1,300 new main battle tanks. But what will these tanks be protecting? Take a look at Poland's border. It's every military planner's worst nightmare to defend. Poland shares a 530 some odd kilometer border with Ukraine. According to open source numbers, there are 8 ports of ground entry between Poland and Ukraine and an additional 4 railways. These are where much of Western military aid transits through. It's what we would call the main high-speed avenues of approach that would need to be defended. It would also become a 2-way range possibly in the future. Poland decided they need a contingency plan.
Basically, Poland is right in the middle of where Russians think of like open ground before reaching Russia, right? Russia has always had that mentality, right? Like defend where? It's like from the Ukraine, Belarusian area, there's like kind of like a smaller area, obviously here. But this is like open field type of area, right? So that's where always been like a panic situation, even for the like Hitler and Nazis, right? When trying to invade Russia, this was the open ground where it was a problem. So Poland is literally there, so it must be really hard to defend all sides there.
In case this border ever becomes hostile, occupied by Russia. It gets worse, because they also share a continuous 400-kilometer border with Belarus, who's a member of the Moscow-led Collective Security Treaty Organization. Now, there are 11 ports of entry connecting Poland to Belarus, according to publicly available data. Just right there, that's a total of roughly 19 different avenues of approach for tanks to come through in a worst-case scenario. Polish forces need to split up and disperse throughout this territory to defend it. I can personally relate to this. I also have trouble setting up personal boundaries. However, Poland has an ace up their sleeve. In 2017, their military stood up the Territorial Defense Forces, which is a 37,000-strong reserve unit with the ability to call up an additional 100,000 volunteers if needed. The Territorial Defense Forces' main mission is to guard against hybrid threats from Belarus in the east. The current conventional threat from Belarus is considered to be a medium threat, with only 2,000 Russian forces stationed there and 50,000 active-duty Belarus professional soldiers. We've seen how Belarus got creative in the past by sending thousands of immigrants to Poland's border to pressure them politically. However, a larger concern here is that in March 2024, Russian tactical nuclear weapons were moved to Belarus. This created a pressing need for air defense that we're going to get into. So there are 4 main highways to cover, but the problem is, it's not like those serve as perfect choke points. When we look closer, when we zoom in on the tactical picture, we can see how Poland's geography plays a major factor. Their land is made up largely of flat plains and farms that are dotted with small forests, usually a few kilometers wide. This makes the borders more porous. Less cover and less concealment. It's a major reason why Poland requires this mass and quantity, because of the lack of natural choke points. It will all work out somehow.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like I said, even the Hitler had this issue, and that's why in Soviet Union took over Poland like that, right? Because after if some entity comes and takes over Poland, then slowly they come to Belarus and Ukraine. Moscow is still far in, and like it starts to become like a narrow and narrower path, right, to defend. That's why Soviet Union was like that widespread in the first place. And so Poland itself defending, it's a hard thing, right? Flat plain is just like not much of like advantages there.
Somehow, Polish military authorities are all too aware of this problem throughout history. And so the strategy they developed is to deploy 3 Polish army divisions equipped with the cutting-edge gear to 3 separate areas of operation. The first is the newly created 18th Mechanized Polish Division that was stood up in 2018. Their mission is to focus on defending the southeastern border.
The 18th Mechanized Division is already pre-positioned in the southeast, instead of having to spend valuable weeks to deploy. Here's a map of some of Poland's major rail networks that can help facilitate logistics. The railway through the city of Rzeszów, just 60 kilometers from the border, has become a major hub for Western aid shipments into Ukraine and the target of Russian spy rings. This is why it's important to have stockpiles and infrastructure here ahead of time as a contingency plan.
Next up is the 16th Mechanized Division that's focused on protecting the northeastern borders, especially here. This is called the infamous Suwałki Gap, the thigh gap of Europe. The Suwałki Gap is a narrow strip of land about 65 kilometers wide between Belarus and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. This is where Poland shares a direct border with Russia. The border is about 230 kilometers long, with 4 major roadways connecting it to Poland. Before the war in Ukraine, estimates placed a sizable 30,000 Russian troops and hundreds of tanks stationed there, but they have since been diverted to the front lines in Ukraine. This has left only 6,000 Russian troops behind. Assuming no changes, some Polish tanks will be tied up in the north by this small force. From the operational perspective, though, control over this corridor was essential for NATO to reinforce their Baltic allies in case of a conflict. Prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this location looked like it was a major vulnerability to NATO planners because of the potential for Russian forces to skirt across to Belarus, linking up and effectively cutting off the Baltic states from resupply. However, that calculation has now changed. According to this article by Callum Tennant of Euronews, this threat is greatly reduced today, thanks to Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Tennant says, quote, "To put it simply, with NATO members bordering most of the Baltic Sea, Russia would be unable to prevent Western reinforcements arriving by sea."
If that sounds like a lot to you, I challenge that assumption, sir, because Poland resurrected the 1st Legion Division from 1944 to also deploy here.
It's the first one that's formed from scratch entirely, starting in 2022, and will consist entirely of state-of-the-art equipment. The 1st Legion Division will be the largest of them all, and its goal is to saturate or fill in the gap between the 18th and 16th Divisions. So that's why maintaining large tank formations is strategically important for Poland. The unique requirement of their geography makes it necessary. But the vast majority of Poland's new tanks will come from the 820 South Korean K2s that they plan on producing domestically in their own country. Make haste, slowly. Part of the problem with any defense procurement is just how long it takes. We have to adjust our frame of mind from thinking about threats that we face tomorrow to thinking about threats we might face 10, 15 years from now. Much of Poland's new equipment will not be fully acquired until 2030 or 2035, even according to their own estimates. The world could look very differently by then.
Yeah, no. Yeah, see, the problem is world could look many differently, and I don't think in positive way. That's the problem. I don't see this when I think about 2035. That's the issue, right? Look, man, everything just basically screams that future is going to be for. And this is not one of those like, oh, news media is like panicking you element. I'm filtering all that out. Even then, like just hard things like, like even global warming and shit, right? That's going to escalate in 10 years, right? Even if we do all the things we're trying to do, prevent it, we're not going to see the result of that until multiple decades. So those multiple decades are going to be harder. And the wars are popping up, which is going to make things even more harder. So yeah, 2035, we'd be lucky if it's anything similar to today. Obviously, technology is going to somewhat get better and would look somewhat technology superior, right? I think of 2014 and 2024. There are things like AI is becoming much stronger, robotics is becoming much stronger. It's not just here. but it's like stronger. You wouldn't have thought of that in 2014, right? So things are changing. Who knows what's going to happen in 2035? But yeah, I don't know. And it feels like about right timeline, right? Because I don't think like if Russia does take over Ukraine, they're not just going to attack Poland from there. If they're going to move forward, they're like other countries they're going to think about. And yeah, Kaliningrad or whatever that country is, yeah, that's no longer an issue because like us, Scandinavian countries are like NATO, right, against Russia. So just sea is accessible there. That's why like Hitler went after those countries immediately. So sea can get cut off. Nobody can just supply through sea.
For all we know, Taylor Swift might not even be the top female artist anymore. It'll take Poland until 2026 just to start manufacturing those K2 tanks. Warsaw has already ordered 366 American Abrams tanks for over $4 billion. That amount will include everything though, from spare parts and training to brand new repair headquarters. Take a look at the Polish city of Poznan in the western part of the country, safely tucked away. It's where the Abrams Training Academy and new Abrams repair plant is located. This is actually a lesson learned by Poland in the early 2000s when they first purchased foreign tanks from Germany, and they quickly found themselves with no way to fix them. This center will also fix damaged Abrams tanks coming out of Ukraine. So far, 5 of them have been knocked out there. Poland will receive 250 of the newest M1A2 SEP version 3, which will include all those modern bells and whistles like thicker armor on the top to counter the newest threat of kamikaze drones. This is why, in the meantime, they've ordered rapid deployment of 180 South Korean K2s as a stopgap. So far, they've received 46 K2s and 69 of the Abrams ordered. But in case things get spicy quicker than that, there's another idea the Polish government has been kicking around since 2023. They might request stationing NATO nuclear weapons on their own soil. On April 30th, 2024, very recently, Poland's President Duda met with Prime Minister Tusk to talk about whether or not they should try to enter something called the Nuclear Sharing Program. What's that? It's a component of NATO's nuclear deterrence policy that provides.
What that is, in the modern world, everybody gets pissy if you talk about acquiring nukes when everybody's trying to reduce it. This is the closest thing you can have to acquire nukes. Should we make our own nukes? No. Everybody will get pissed off. So fine, can we borrow some of yours? There you go. That's what that is.
Nuclear weapons to member states that don't possess their own. It's like lending your friend a book to build trust with them. It's exactly like that analogy. Just since 2009 alone, Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey have all played host to nuclear weapons that were given to them through this sharing program. Sharing is caring, even when it comes to nukes. This is now being openly debated in Poland. Poland believes it's necessary in response to Belarus receiving nuclear weapons under a similar program with Russia. Check out our new merch if you have a chance. It's not shoot to kill, it's shoot to chill. Another challenge Poland's armed forces face is how to move thousands of infantry around such a large country. This requires infantry fighting vehicles. That's why Poland ordered 1,400 domestically built IFV Borsuk vehicles to replace their 1,200 Soviet-era BMPs. However, only 5 prototypes have been built so far, and their delivery isn't planned to be finished until 2035, which leaves them stuck with those BMPs in the meantime. And this.
See, the problem with all this is like they're trying to make their own thing, which is a good thing, obviously. But you don't want to be caught, like your pants down or something. If Russia attacks, when you make your own equipment, you try to use that equipment, you don't know your own flaws. That's version 1 for you, right? So if a country trying to make their own thing, and if like war is inevitable, this will like slowly ease in and still have like Western equipment there, right? If you just replace BMPs with your new thing, and if the new thing has a lot of flaws, and like now Russia invades, you're gonna be screwed, right? So obviously make your own. That's a thing of the modern world now. Every country is trying to be independent, which they should be, knowing how like creating allies here and there just creates some kind of a lock, right? Where everybody has to get involved in like major wars. And World War III becomes like a real thing, right? So if like countries can defend their own self, other countries don't have to like get involved. That is a good thing all around, right? Be your own deterrent or something like that. But you need to be like in future type of way. You're making something now like version 2 or something is going to be more reliable rather than version 1. So you don't want to fight with version 1.
Adds to the long list of different types of vehicles that they need to maintain, which leads to one of the next raised concerns about having so many different types of vehicles is going to increase the cost of logistics. But considering how large the fleets of all these vehicles are, The economies of scale should help mitigate that problem. Whereas some other countries in Europe have been criticized for not investing in quantity, we'll see that is really not something you could say to Poland with a straight face.
Each country in NATO is focused on acquiring different types of weapon systems. Some are focusing on quantity, while others focus on nuclear weapons. Poland actually talks about this being one of their 4 pillars of defense, saying, quote, Poland takes into account the context of their membership in NATO. The basic factor shaping Poland's security is its strong embedding in the European structures and the development of bilateral and regional cooperation with key partners.
Every stick has 2 ends. The question of whether or not Russia would invade Poland again in the future is well beyond my capabilities of answering as just a lower level grunt. I can look at the statements made by both parties. On the one hand, Putin has addressed this question and said publicly that he has no intention of invading Poland, pinky promise. But Russia also stated they had no plans of invading Ukraine in January 2022. And so, on the other
Yeah, but it's technically special operation, whatever that is, right? It's not invading special operation. We never said we're gonna invade Poland, but Poland feels like the same thing as Ukraine. Like, what was that? Like neo-Nazis, this and that. There you go. So another special operation. See, I think I believe Putin there only basis of like after like taking Ukraine's, they probably have to like go, go to like northern countries. I'm always forgetting their name. Countries that are north of Belarus, right? And if he does all that, try to take over, somehow does take over them, like he's going to be, Russia is going to be exhausted, right? Even if with war economy, they'll have to recover. So I don't see them like just going directly against Poland or anything like that anytime soon, right? I don't know. So in that sense, right now or any in foreseeable future, I don't think Russia is going to invade Poland or something. But yeah, that's the point. Poland can't take that chance, so they're preparing.
On the other hand, Poland's President Duda said, quote, we're a nation who was enslaved by Russia several times. If Russia wins the war in Ukraine, he will attack one more time. He will attack other states. So the Polish government claims they view the threat from Russia seriously. There are 2 sides to every story. But something I don't think is discussed often enough is how there are many forms of warfare that can occur short of that threshold of a full-blown invasion of Poland.
Our Task and Purpose Discord channel clued me in on the news that this espionage was already happening. Poland's internal security service has uncovered multiple Russian spy rings that were able to successfully track weapons shipments from Poland into Ukraine and then strike them with long-range fires.
They highlighted this in their very own 2020 National Defense Strategy document that is many pages that I read so you don't have to. It says, quote, the Russian Federation carries out activities below the threshold of war, of hybrid nature, using non-military means, including cyber attacks, disinformation, to destabilize the structures of...
I mean, that has been the case with all the powers in the past. Every power kinda did that in their own way. It depends on the technology. In the current technology with internet, you do it cyber way, right? There's always like information war going on, like around the war, before the war, and even after the war, right? There's always like misinformation, like gaslighting, and all that shit is always working, right? Now with the internet, it becomes easier for like cyber attack and things like that. But yeah.
Of Western states and societies to create divisions among allies. If Russian forces were to annex all of Ukraine, there would undoubtedly be gray zone warfare, including flying enemy fighter jets through their airspace, infiltrations, possibly fomenting revolutions in their territory, or large-scale military exercises on their borders. There could be drone and missile strikes within their borders that still would not amount to a full-scale invasion.
These are some of the same motivations the Russian government has given for why they don't want Ukraine to be friendly to Europe and the West.
How you make your bed will determine how well you sleep. Simply having a massive amount of tanks isn't enough for Poland. We've learned tanks are vulnerable without air defense systems. This is why Poland struck a deal worth up to $15 billion with the United States for 48 of their Patriot missile launcher stations and more than 650 interceptor missiles to go with it. The Patriot has about 150 kilometers max range and can intercept ballistic missiles, aircraft, and drones. In theory, this could be enough coverage to protect Poland's entire border, their major cities, and their defense industrial base in some cases. A separate $5 billion agreement with the United Kingdom for 100 of their Nauru air defense systems and 1,000 missiles is meant to ensure the protection of their ground forces. All of these air defense systems are planned to be synchronized under their integrated battle command system. Europe is attempting to build an integrated missile defense shield like the Iron Dome, and Poland is going to be at the center of it. Poland's former Minister of Defense said, quote, "We are drawing conclusions from the war that is taking place in Ukraine. We know the methods used by the Russians, and we have no doubt that anti-aircraft and anti-missile defenses are an important element of security. Another necessary protection for tanks and air defense assets to maneuver freely is artillery protection. $450 million will go to ramping up Poland's artillery shell production. Currently, they produce about 30,000 artillery.
Yeah, obviously how Russia did things earlier with the missiles and like strategic attacks, yeah. But then again, even if they don't do that, they can still launch a slow-moving war if they don't have any other way of doing it. But at least, you know, like you're not going to be crippled by strategic attacks, how they started with Ukraine. So that's something.
Artillery shells per year, which is about as much as the US produces in 1 month. Their goal, according to Defense 24, is to reach 200,000 per year by 2029. The reason for this increase isn't just to send them to Ukraine. They'll be needed to feed their increased artillery hardware. Poland's investing $2 billion on 672 South Korean K-9 howitzers, many of which will be produced domestically, and 500 of the American-made HIMARS launchers, and 288 of the South Korean Chunmoo rocket artillery. These are long-range strike capability out to 300 kilometers, and they plan to acquire over 1,000.
I'm suddenly hearing about South Korean weapons a lot. Did they just ramped up now, or I'm just like hearing it now? Because it does make sense with the threat of like China, North Korea just being there. Japan and especially South Korea would be like amping up their military thing. Already know like someone like even Samsung made military. I don't know, a lot of this might be made by Samsung. Who the fuck knows? Samsung is a giant like that. But yeah, I've been hearing about, you know, South Korean equipment a lot because they become like that good now.
Munitions for them at a combined cost of $12 billion. I think this quote from Poland's former defense minister helps us understand their perspective. Let us assume the rulers of the Kremlin.
Did he just fall?
Minister helps us understand their perspective. Let us assume the rulers of the Kremlin decided to rebuild.
They have to like big ass armor, heavy ass armor and weapon, and have to run in a situation like that. I mean, that is a real life scenario if you're at war. But yeah, every time we see like people like Call of Duty hear about this shit, we don't think about these nitty gritty details, right? Just like walking on like weird terrain with a heavy ass equipment. You can't fall, otherwise you're dead. Somebody will shoot you.
The Russian Empire. Our goal is to create a situation in which a strong Polish army will actually deter the aggressor, and one of the most important components of this army will be rocket artillery, end quote. According to this line of thinking, Poland has to assume the worst case scenario. There's a concept from Sun Tzu that I think helps explain this line of thinking. It's called being on death ground. Death ground is when your opponent puts your back up against the wall and forces you to prepare for a fight. However, we've learned that your artillery, air defenses, and tanks, they're all sitting ducks if you can't maintain some level of air superiority or at least contested airspace. This is why Poland's acquiring 32 F-35A Lightning II jets from the United States as part of a $4.6 billion deal. This will complement their 48 F-16s and about 28 MiG-29s, and they're also purchasing 48 F-50 fighters for a total of over 150 fighter aircraft. And an additional $12 billion will be spent on acquiring 96 of the AH-64 Apache attack helicopters. Poland's modernization.
This is an insane and impressive improvement, but are the numbers good enough against something like Russia? Because right now, obviously, like we've seen like how Russian equipments are failing, but like obviously this channel has told us, Task and Purpose, that their economy is becoming war economy. So they're just gonna like amp up the production constantly. Look at how much artillery they make now in a year, like nobody can compare, right? So slowly they could just like amp up the things like, you know, tanks, helicopters and things like that, jets. They could slowly iron out all the issues they have now. Because if they do go to war against Poland, it's going to be like much in the future. By then, who knows how Russia is going to be with their war economy and things. So will this equipment be enough, right? These are expensive and good equipments, F-35s, but the numbers, are they enough?
will not be without its fair share of challenges, though. According to Robert Schulda's defense policy paper, Poland's demographic forecasts show a decreasing population, which could make doubling their forces tough to pull off. Currently, the Polish army has roughly 70,000 active personnel, according to open source numbers, which means reaching 140,000 could be difficult, but it's the goal they're striving for. There is no loss without some gain. Opinion Research Center survey.
Would it be hard though? Like they have like what 30-40 million, like he said, population, right? And amongst that, I'm pretty sure they can like in wartime they can definitely amp up the number if they need to through conscription and things, right? Even like the older men, like 30 or something around them, they would like we've seen like with the Federation video, like they can be really effective when time comes.
2022 says that 79% of Poles believe that the war in Ukraine threatens the security of the country. Is it okay to say Poles? That sounds, can you say Jew, Pole? They're okay both, I think. I can't speak for the people, but these changes...
I mean, no, because in Jewish, it's mostly religion-based. And it became religion-based so much that it has become a like derogatory term type of way, right? I guess it depends with the history. I don't think like Poles has that kind of a meaning behind it, because we'll just like Poland feels like a heavy thing to say, so we'll just like Poles. I don't know. Obviously I don't know much about like if it's a derogatory term or not. I'm pretty sure I've never heard of it like that. I'm pretty sure it's not. I don't know.
Appear to be widely popular in Poland. Beyond the clear national security factors that we covered, it might have to do with the fact that Poland's government also increased social program spending at the same time, increasing pay for teachers by 30%, for example, which means you're getting both guns and butter for dinner tonight. Unlike in France, where pensions may be cut, Poland's actually increasing pension payments. However, one of the main challenges for this modernization will be if Poland is able to secure long-term financing for the project. The budget deficit in 2024 will be 5% of GDP, which is higher than expected. Under the agreements, a second loan from South Korean financial institutions will need to be provided to Poland, which has made South Korean lawmakers have to increase their lending limits to stay on schedule. I think when you look at the new equipment Poland is acquiring, it tells us
Yeah, but there's many elements like they're acquiring South Korean equipment. They get a loan from South Korea, so it's just like very complicated way, but basically it's just like lending equipment temporarily for the future business or something, right? It's really weird and really hard to like really understand like how this global economy this way works, like what does it mean by deficit, this and that, right? And when it comes to Poland, they won't care about deficit growing, right? Debt growing, because they're probably preparing for war. During the wartime, you don't think about those things. After war, you'll worry about things, basically something like that, right? If you survive this, you'll worry about debt. So they won't care about that much if they see imminent threat coming. South Koreans, like they're giving equipments and things and goods, basically military goods. So they won't have issues with lending them, because they're like technically lending them through equipment, kinda, right? So in the future they can just like collect in a way, right? So it's just like business great in all sides or something. So I don't know, that's not big of an issue, right? When it comes to like debt and like like business, like GDP deficits and things, that's different. Like debt is different. It's really hard to understand that. People usually use that as a political tool to like target the current government or something, well knowing that doesn't mean much. It happens in US more than anything, even though US's debt is like unique compared to everybody else, because like dollar has that position in the market. But yeah,
interesting story. Could be designed to be more than just a defense. Personally, I believe from Poland's point of view, they need adversaries to look at their army and view them as having the capability to go on the offensive if they were pressured into it. It's not enough to just have a defensive capability to deter war. You also need your enemy to believe that your ability to take the fight to them, to make them think twice about messing with you.
Yeah.
It's true, Russian forces have lost 2,000 tanks in their war, but they remain a credible threat because they've thrown themselves into a wartime economy. Their forces are reported to be 15% bigger than in 2022. They've spent 40% of their entire budget on military defense last year. Poland wouldn't be going it alone, though. They'd be reinforced by US and NATO allied forces in the event of a conflict. Poland's armed forces remains one of the
Germany would be one of the first countries to reinforce Poland if Poland does go to war against Ukraine, Russia, not Ukraine, right? Because Germany is just next if Poland goes, so they will be like the first incentivized to help them. And obviously, like other major NATO countries as well, like France, UK, USA will, like, obviously intervene, like even big time this time.
Important factors on NATO's eastern flank. Alliances come and go, friendships change, but something that has preserved since the 10th century is Poland. And this new defense modernization effort shows they plan to be around for many centuries to come. If you want to learn and talk with a community of people interested in subjects like this,
Yeah, not this time. I think the Poland's whole feel is like not this time. We're gonna change the cycle this time. Yeah, come for us, we're gonna punch you back. That's the mentality this time. But yeah. Well, that was how Poland is preparing for war by its own task and purpose. It feels like far enough in the future. I think Poland knows that as well, the way they are preparing right now, right? So if Ukraine does fall, right, if Russia eventually does decide to attack Poland, it's going to take time, 2030, 2035, something like that, or even like past that, who knows. By then, I think Poland will be prepared enough the way they are going on right now, right? 10 years of preparing for war is like enough to like strengthen your every sides. But yeah, right, I guess I'll see you next time.